To start off the meeting, I would like to ask our solicitor, Max, to please go over the revisions to the ordinance.
If it's okay, I'm not gonna go over all of them, because there was a number of them here and there, which I won't read them all.
Okay.
I'd like to focus on sections 12 and 13.
When did you want first on this?
You wanna do a roll call?
It didn't list roll call, so I didn't know if we needed to do that for
Just
the.
go ahead and do it for the record. Doesn't hurt.
Cynthia?
Cynthia Valley.
Ray Rivera. Marco Rain. Kristen Dumar.
Anthony Williams. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
I'd like to focus on sections 12 and 13. Because these are maybe just a little bit different than what sort of the instructions were before, so I'm going to point them out. And talk about sort of the method. Everybody has a public comment on this ordinance, should come up and speak during the public hearing. Because we'll talk about other changes or whatever after we have the public comment. But in section 12, there was some discussion about what happens with somebody who is a nurse or comes in and rents for a period of time, and whether or not they would be subject to the short-term rentals. And this was sort of some compromise language. It doesn't apply to a rental lease agreement that's 60 days or more, and allows for the renewal of the short-term rental if necessary. And there was some talk about exempting sort of particular properties from the ordinance. As I got to writing about that, there is really, if you look at the placarding and having to get a license and all of those things, they should apply to every property as far as I was concerned. One that was the big issue related to the parking. So the exemption relates to the parking, but not to the placarding and signing up and all of those things. So that's all I wanted to say to begin. Madam Chair, I assume normal rules are in order where you have 3 minutes to speaker.
Yes.
So point of order, are we doing comments first or are we doing our comments on this first? What are we doing
This is
first?
the public hearing.
This is the public hearing.
Public comment.
Can you go ahead? Thank you.
So anybody who has public comments regarding this ordinance, now is the time to bring them. You please go up to the podium, make sure you sign in with your name and address. And because the public comments during the planning commission will not include additional comments on this ordinance. So it's just limited to this public hearing. Ma'am, you are?
Barbara Bell Ford, 29 The Strand. I would like to briefly express the position of many in the residential area. We are not against B&Bs, where an owner living in his house rents bedrooms to guests on a short-term basis. We are not against hotels. We are not against inns. We enjoy local restaurants and specialty shops and hope for their continued success. What we do object to is the renting of whole house tourist homes in the residential area. Let me give you 2 examples of whole house tourist homes rentals. Number 1, this is when the owner of a whole house tourist home obtains a long-term lease on this property from a tenant. This tenant in turn then leases and manages rooms on a short-term basis in this whole house tourist home. This tenant, the holder of the long-term lease, is usually incorporated and becomes what we call a rental arbitrator. The second example is when the owner of a whole house tourist home becomes a landlord himself and rents rooms directly to the tenants in this whole house tourist home on a short-term basis. There is no intermediary here. This owner landlord would also usually incorporate under an LLC the liability protection. It doesn't matter whether the owner of the whole house tourist home personally resides in the same community of the whole house tourist home or not. To allow these rental arrangements elevates the profit motivation over maintaining the charm and uniqueness of a small town with pride in individual home ownership. By the way, I have a whole house tourist home in my backyard. Yes, in my backyard, 29 The Strand, the nucleus of the preserved historic district. Rental arbitrage exists in my backyard. How do
I'm
I?
sorry, but that's your 3 minutes.
I'd just like to finish. How do I feel about it? Totally
No,
irrelevant.
I'm sorry, but I have to keep the rules for everybody.
Chair.
I'm Ellen Kendor. I live at 142 East Second Street. And the comments that we have are gonna go beyond 3 minutes, so there are 3 of us going to be reading them consecutively. First of all, I saw a gap in the property designations. The short-term rentals seem to be defined as entire property rented to a single party at any given time that may or may not have cooking facilities and is not occupied by the owner manager. The B&Bs are defined as live-in owners renting guest rooms in their homes. Breakfast is not mentioned, but because it's a bed and breakfast, I think it should be inserted into the language. Then we jump to hotel, motel, and inn, all lumped together with no parking requirements, simply defined as having more than 10 guest rooms. And where does the Terry House fit in? It's not a short-term rental or a B&B, and surely it's not a motel. Fewer than 10 guest rooms, all rented to different parties. They do have kitchen facilities, used for catered events, but they do not serve breakfast to guests. They have 0 off-street parking, and there's no live-in owner or manager. My thought would be to break out inn from hotel motel and define it to fit such a property as the Terry House, with more than 4 but fewer than 10 guest rooms, etc. And as I have mentioned above. To me, the Terry House is the type of guest accommodation that best suits our historic community of mostly small, single-family homes. For us, it has provided a second guest room several times. Other establishments like it should not be shut out in favor of our single-family homes being taken out of the permanent residential pool, which would happen if it were simply grandfathered as a B&B.
Thank you, Ellen.
And your name, sir?
Leo Manis. All of these places should be required to show proof of adequate liability insurance. It should be specific, it should be specified that the license does not pass to a new owner or manager if the property ownership changes. On site should be added in terms of all parking requirements. Rented to a single party at any given time needs to be inserted in the definition of short-term rental. Short-term rental definition needs to address cooking facilities and state that parking must be on site. The total number of short-term rental guest rooms needs to be capped at 3 or 4. Otherwise, it become a multi-family or a party house. Short-term rentals do not typically rent for more than 180 days per year. 270 days per year is too generous. Hotel motel does not mention a parking requirement. It needs to. Bed and breakfast aids breakfast offered into its definition. 2 hours is too long to make the guest wait for assistance. For example, we once had a bat in the house. That's not like a clogged toilet, which is bad enough. But 2 hours can be an eternity in the middle of the night with a bat flying around your bed. Thank you.
I'm Charlie Cantor, 142 Second Street. Continuing our observations, under building requirements number 5, on-site should be added. The number of parking spaces relative to the number of bedrooms needs to be further considered. Under prohibition, parties needs to be added. Also, guests arriving by car should be prohibited in the historic neighborhood due to our restricted available parking. Under violations, add failure to provide proof of liability insurance, also noise. Under section 13, whatever it addresses parking, insert on site so it's quickly clear. If any short-term properties that currently exist but don't comply should end up being grandfathered, there needs to be a sunset provision. It could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, it could be anything you want. There should be a sunset provision. At the end of this, they must revert back to a private single-family residence. Finally, we suspect there may be an issue with extending short-term rentals into residential neighborhoods that don't currently allow this, when in fact they are likely better suited because they have an on-site, off-street parking. When it comes to accepting a neighborhood for this reason or that reason, there is no valid reason to subject our small historic residential neighborhoods except in the consequences of short-term rentals and other residential communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
For the record, I just want to recognize that Commissioners Franklin and Turner are both present.
Hi, I'm Ruth Beckrow. I live on 172nd Street. I was really on the fence on this issue until I found out we have the wedding events that's on the internet for 150 people coming for a wedding event. And we also have another events party in the alley behind the library. And I'm just wondering, how are we gonna accommodate the park with these events? Then I found out that people are buying a property to to these VRBOs or bed and breakfasts. And that's why I was on the fence, because I knew that businesses can come in or people can come in and start renting properties. And I really love this community. I moved here in 1997. And we had a community. We've had events, there's the Progress Committee or the, whatever they call themselves on 3rd Street. And I think this is gonna destroy our community. And I remember when I moved in here, the older people were so proud that we didn't become a Williamsburg. Because the Hopi people came down and they wanted us to be a Williamsburg, and they said, no, this is our. So my comment to you is, please keep this as a community. Since I don't know any of you, I'm not sure how long you've lived here, but it's important that we keep this as a community.
Thank you for your comments.
John Reeves, I live at 50 East Second Street. I did want to thank the planning commission for all the work you've done on this issue. Obviously thought long and hard of it, wrestled with some difficult issues. I did want to talk about the parking thing, because I think that's the big kicker in this set of requirements. As a historian of transportation, once pointed out to me that towns like Newcastle are in fact walkable, because when they were built, they did not require parking spaces for every unit. So I live on 52nd. I have no off-site parking. My next door neighbor has no off-site parking. We would not be under this, be able to do any kind of short-term rental, basically. So in fact, I don't know if there's statistics on how many buildings in town have off-site parking, but I suspect that it's fairly low. It could be a low percentage, 10% or less. Certainly the Cherry House does not have off-site parking for its 7 rooms. So I suggest that maybe we talk, we think more about that off-site parking requirement. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Very, 31 was Strand. The current stage of short-term rentals has already created erosion in the residential area of historic Newcastle. I'd like to note some points of concern regarding the draft ordinance. There should be a regulation to prevent a renter or anyone other than the property owner taking a property, a whole house rental, turning it into a short-term rental. The property should be owned by a Newcastle city resident for all short-term rental properties. And those property owners should be subject to carrying a proper general liability insurance policy of $1 million, which is common in most places. If a property passes to a new owner, the short-term rental status should not pass to the new owner. If there is a problem with the property, the 2-hour response time seems baffling to me. A homeowner should be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a response time no less than 20 to 25 minutes. On to parking. Parking is always an issue in this town. It certainly is on the Strand. Please do not create more frustration for residents. Consider the 1 to 2 guests per room equals 1 off-street parking rule, along with every 2 additional guest rooms requiring 1 additional off-street parking. Days of operation. This is not a resort town with beaches or skiing. 270 days is excessive. Even Aspen has a limit of 120 days, provided that the owner is a primary resident. Personally, I think the 180 days is even too much. As a side note, Sunday night at 7:24 p.m., I was enjoying a water view from our kitchen door leading to our deck. The short-term rentals in the home behind ours exited the house in their pajamas. They continued filming the water and turned around and filmed our homes, our patios, our decks. I'm asking for our privacy. Please, this is hugely disappointing to us. Tighten regulations so our future neighbors do not have to live with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carol Vukolich. I live at 33 The Strand, and much of what I'm going to say sort of repeats some of the things that my colleagues have been saying to you already. I wanted to start by looking at section 2, page 2. There are 3 kinds of short-term rentals. There's a whole home with cooking facilities. There's a room in a person's home. And then there are the inns, hotels, and the other categories that our solicitor created. To label one a short-term rental does not make sense when there are 3 kinds of short-term rentals. So when I look further at the definition, I have some questions. Like, what does it mean that there are other residential dwelling units? What are we talking about there? What is a part thereof? Is it a rental of a piece, a part of a whole? And if it's a rental of a piece, then doesn't that turn it into a bed and breakfast? We suggest a totally different definition for a whole home rental. So our definition would be something like a whole house, a duplex, an apartment, or a condominium with cooking facilities where a paying guest, to differentiate from when our families come to visit, rents sleeping accommodations with no more than 2 adults in the same guest room for fewer than 31 days. We think that paying should be inserted before guests in all of the definitions. Someone also mentioned that we suggest limiting the number of guest rooms available in any whole house, duplex, or condominium to maybe 3 or 4. I would suggest 2 is fine. Why? Because we really do want to reduce the potential of these homes becoming party houses, which they easily become. Then I looked at a second concern, was around the regulations that apply to bed and breakfast. Currently, it appears that there's maybe only one regulation that applies to bed and breakfasts, and that's that they have 1 off-street parking space for each guest room or suite, which incidentally, we do support that if you're going to allow these things in our residential neighborhood, that every bedroom has 1 off-street parking. But for a B&B, there's no indication that they require a license. There's no indication, as many other cities' regulations do, that the homeowner must be in residence when there is a paying guest on the property overnight. They too must be there. And there's no indication that they must pass a safety inspection. So all of them are critically important.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening all. First, I recommend everybody go to Channel 10's reports that they've done in the last 2 weeks. The best example of what we don't want to see happen here. There was a unit that was rented, maximum 2 people, contract said 2 people. Ended up 17 people were there overnight for a party. 2 people were killed, 17 hurt. I don't think there's anybody here that wants to see that happen. Does it happen every night? Could it happen every week? Could it happen once in a lifetime? It doesn't matter. You've got to keep the worst scenario in mind when you put something together. Second, owner must be on location at all times, whether it's 2, 4, 8, 24 people, it doesn't matter. 2 people to a room, 1 parking space off street per room. Not complicated. Number of guests, no, they can go to a restaurant, they can go to the park, they can go to the mall, doesn't matter. It invites parties. I feel the B&B on Packett's Alley was snuck in. I don't know if any of the neighbors, I don't know of anybody in the city, I don't know anybody that was warned of such a thing stuck in their backyard. That location must be brought up to date. Max, you can argue it all you want, say, well, we can't go back. No, they have to dance to the same theme everybody else does. Time noise ordinance. I've rented in Seattle City for 24 years. Time, lights out, shut down, not in the street, conversing. Again, restaurants, mall, parking. Maximum rental time, don't leave it open. It's gotta be a week, 2 weeks, whatever you decide. If an owner is not gonna be renting it anymore, deal's done, they must turn in their license and occupancy. Maximum time a year, 120 days is good enough, and insurance companies pretty much max it at 180, but 120 is reasonable enough. I don't think that's too short of a time. But importantly, owner occupied. No one is to be in anybody's house as a paying guest without the owner there. If they want to cook breakfast, good, but not there without.
Thank you, Phil.
My name is Vinnie Beal, the 26th Strand. In a way of sort of summation, I would say that to those of you in the planning commission, and I've been aware of the situation since it first occurred several months ago. There are a number of entities throughout Newcastle County that have much stricter ordinances for B&Bs than what has been proposed before. We had 70 to 100 people who made some very good comments, suggestions. I would advise you all to take their suggestions because they are neighbors, they are residents, they're taxpayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I pretty much support echo almost all the comments you made here. Some of them are really excellent and detailed. Support details matter. However, my comments tonight are personal. I take this very personally. I want you, everyone here on this voting commission, to take it very personally. live next to a rental place, a short-term rental place? I do. Do you? Do you? Do you want to have one moved in next door? And have this rear fence? Regulated, semi-regulated, not regulated? You must imagine personally that there will be a short-term rental next door to you, over your back fence. And if any of you have young children, take it personally and imagine what it might be like for your children to be exposed to who knows what. As it's already pointed out, nothing may ever happen. That doesn't mean it won't. It's one of my comments last time I spoke. Take this very personally. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment regarding this ordinance?
Excuse me, are you going to be reading out the comments that were sent?
Yes, I will be.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a few to read, but before I read those, I want to make sure nobody else has any comments. And the comments time during the planning commission meeting will not include any more comments on this ordinance. This public hearing is going to only be for this ordinance. And public discussion will be for other things on the agenda for the planning commission other than this ordinance. Okay, I don't see anybody getting up.
So if you're gonna read, you ought to set the timer to.
I can't read that.
Well, the point is, you don't get to get 10 minutes because you write a lot. Check the ordinance.
All right, this one is from Dorsey Fisk. It was received by email. First of all, I find section 2 in the draft ordinance unclear. Short-term rental, a house, duplex, apartment, condominium, or other residential dwelling unit or parts thereof, where a tourist or guest rents sleeping or living accommodations of less than 31 days, such as Airbnb, Vrbo, or other similar rental accommodations. As there is a provision in the proposed ordinance for a tourist or guest who rents sleeping or living accommodation in parts thereof of a dwelling unit, presumably that is not a full rental of the entire building or unit. In that case, would the owner be renting several parts of the building to 2 or more different people at the same time? My understanding was that if there was a short-term rental similar to Airbnb, that is for the entire building or unit, and no one else would be on the property. As I said above, this is unclear. With respect to whether short-term rentals of houses in the historic residential area without the owner's presence in the building should be permitted, my question is, cui bono? Who?
Good.
Huh?
It's laughing for who's good.
Oh, thank you. Who would a short-term full house rental ordinance for historic residential area benefit? Not most of the residents who would lose the community of full-time neighbors, of people living nearby, familiar faces who may be friends and on whom they can call in an emergency, a friendly neighborhood of houses usually occupied and lighted in the evenings. Investors who might buy houses to rent out for brief stays rather than lease to tenants per annum would benefit. It would be tempting for landlords with a number of properties in the historic residential area to pursue that as a more profitable course than long-term rentals. But would this be a benefit to those living in the neighborhood or for the city? End of that one. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
This letter is from Mary Wolcott Davis, 24 East 3rd Street. Dear members of the Planning Commission, I have lived in Newcastle my entire life, 74 years, and am concerned that allowing short-term rentals in the residential district would destroy the very thing that makes our city special, neighborhood. We know our neighbors in our block and next block over, and we care about them. I grew up going to Rehoboth Beach in the summers. We knew everyone in the neighborhood. Once investors got the idea of making money by buying homes and turning them into rental properties, that neighborhood vanished. It could happen here. I urge you to allow 0% of short-term rentals in the residential historic district. The commercial district is the appropriate location for them. This is from Robert Davis, 24 East Third Street. To the members of the City of Newcastle Planning Commission, I would like to add my name to the list of those opposed to tourist homes within the historic residential district in Newcastle. My wife and I own a house in Rehoboth Beach built in 1922. Like many of the homes built at that time, they were meant as summer retreats for family vacations. Summer neighborhoods where everyone knew each other were created. Starting in the 1980s, however, developers began to see these properties as opportunities for more lucrative tourist homes or Airbnbs. As a result, we now know no one in our several block area due to the weekly transiency of renters. Neighborhoods are gone, and it didn't take long to happen due to the short-sightedness of town administrators. Recently, some steps have been taken, including, for example, a moratorium on swimming pools deemed an attractive nuisance within the city. While I realize that Rehoboth Beach is different than Newcastle, nonetheless, the steps towards getting to an undesirable end are the same. Short-sightedness, vague or absent guidelines, and lack of enforcement of guidelines. One last point. I hope the commission will consider the overwhelming response against expansion of the number of tourist homes, either by signing a petition or by individual letters, as opposed to the few who have voiced in favor.
Thank you. Okay. This is from Alice Jarvis. I don't have an address. I have strong feelings about property rights, and anytime the government wants to take away rights I had when I bought the property, they should have very compelling reasons. I do not consider something will annoy some of my neighbors a compelling reason. No, I do not want someone to convert a neighboring house to a short-term rental, but I also don't want dogs that bark a lot, accordion music, or families with 3+ cars. I do not think my reasons are compelling enough to get the government involved, unless it is a daily polka music practice that should be restricted. Parking, a resident would have 1 to 2 cars all the time. A rental will have 1 or 2 cars some of the time. Parties, the towns reporting problems are popular enough to have hotels, and the short-term rentals pull party-prone people out of commercial districts and into residential neighborhoods where there are no tourists before. Zoning, a historic residential district which is purposefully full of attractions meant to attract tourists into the neighborhood is not the same as a plain residential district where anyone who is not a resident or their guest is a new kind of out-of-place stranger. Data so far, you can rent the whole Terry house, check its Airbnb page, all 7 rooms for a single night for $1,712. If you were thinking that a short-term rental will attract large destructive party groups, please explain why this is not happening. It might happen is not good enough. Do not take away any of my existing property rights because something would annoy some people. Maybe, except maybe polka music. If I had a choice between daily polka practice and a short-term rental next door, well, perhaps I should start a petition. Okay, with that, I am making a motion that we close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
I second Bree Rivera.
Bree Rivera? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. So the public hearing is closed. Do we have to wait any time? Okay. So we are now going to start the regular planning commission meeting. Before we do that, I just have been asked, our normal stenographer is out. She has asked that I identify anybody who makes a motion, and identify anybody who seconds the motion, just so she makes sure she knows, who made the motion. And we should do a roll call. So let's do a roll call again, and Cindy, you did such a good job starting us, I'll let you start again.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia Batty.
Tamara Stoner.
Franklin.
Bree Rivera.
Margot Rain,
Kristen Zumar.
okay, we have a quorum, so I will call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. I have 2 corrections for the minutes. On page 5. Where it says everyone's, there's 2 commas or 2 apostrophes instead of 1. And then the other one is on page 7. It says 270, but it doesn't say 270 what? I think it should say 270 days. Does anybody else have any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? With the correction.
Bree Rivera, make a motion to approve the correction.
Bree, motion to approve.
Kristen Zumar, second.
And Kristen has seconded, and all in favor say aye.
There's 2, should be 2 abstentions.
2, okay, so abstentions from Tamara and Stephen, and anybody else voting against that? Okay, so the minutes are approved. So discussion and possible vote and referral to city council regarding ordinance 555. Max, can I ask you to kind of run that discussion, please?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
So we had started off, as you may recall, the meeting with an educational meeting, and we had another meeting to figure out, look at different codes, we started with drafts, so we've gotten to this point. There's a number of different ways the commission can move forward today. The commission could, and I'm sure there might be some people want to talk about individual tweaks to the ordinance. We could go through that, and then you could vote on those additional tweaks. You could say, sort of send it back with directions to sort of have me make additional changes, direct me to make those changes. Or if there's not too many changes that are made, we could do that here today, right? Like if you wanted to change, for example, 180 or 270 to 180, that's pretty easy. We could do that. We could get that.
Sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
I wasn't close enough to complain. You could have, if you made those changes. And then you would have a vote up or down. The vote up or down would be, yes, we want to refer this to council, or no, we don't. Right, and you could, and your range of motions could be whatever you would want, so. In other words, this is really, I've kind of guided the process up until now, but this is the time that I really need to turn it over to the commission, because it's your will to determine what you want. If you like the ordinance the way it's written, you could recommend it, there's lots of things you can do. So If those folks have changes, I would probably start there, I'll vote on any particular changes, and then see where the motions take us from here.
Okay, thank you. All right, that being said, why don't we go page by page? This point,
That's just a question. Next, is there any provision in here for the type of liability insurance that has to be in licensing at all?
There is not.
I do
You
think that needs to
definitely
be
want to add
addressed.
that.
That needs to be added.
Okay, so hang on a second.
I
We
was-
have a motion, can we have a motion to add a clause to deal with, to add $1 million for liability insurance?
I'll make a motion to add a clause for all categories of short-term rentals. That would include bed and breakfast, short-term rental, and hotel, motel, and inn for $1 million of liability.
a
A
minimum.
minimum of $1 million of liability insurance.
And Cynthia made that motion. Do I have a second?
Kristen Zumar, second.
Kristen, second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So I need you to add that one.
I can add that one.
Okay.
Tangential to that is a requirement then, under operational violations of failure to show insurance. So you've got to echo it in that, section.
So,
That's on page
Commissioner
6.
Commissioner Batty, I was thinking about just putting it in the licensing requirement, so the city has to have it up front. Would that be sufficient?
Sure, but if they let it lapse, then it's a violation, right? How's that gonna get managed?
I understand your concern, I can work that in 2 places.
Okay. Thank you.
Max, I have a question.
Yes.
In listening to everyone, one of the things that I had
Can you speak into the mic, because I'm not really
was thinking about in brief is the application process for wanting to have one of these type of facilities. And is there a clear path to obtain a license for one of these?
Yes.
And what happens when they apply? Is there a time frame? One of the things that I suggested was, and this is similar to one of the state entities of getting a OABCC license. If someone wants to have a Airbnb or whatever the term, they have to submit a letter to the community within X amount of feet of said property. And they would have to put in a public notice in the newspaper or weekly. This ensures that any property owner or resident has a voice to respond to that particular application. And I was asked, why would you make things difficult? And I said, it's not making things difficult. If you have a process for someone who wants to do business in a particular community for something as sensitive as this, then there should be a process to get there.
So I'm gonna answer your question in two
Okay.
different tranches, okay? The requirements for the licensing, you have to obtain a business license, a rental housing license. You have to have an inspection of the property, a life safety inspection, right? And then you have to get a separate, short-term rental license. And the requirements are set forth in 230.27.1.
Okay.
So those are the requirements that are there. To your second set of questions regarding the process, right? The process to go through to get those, that would be a significant revision of the ordinance. And so what you would do is, that's the process that you want to do. You would make a motion and see if your other commissioners support that. I will tell you, if that happens, I'll have to go back to the drafting drawing board. And I know you sent that to me, but I think directions from the commission as a whole. Does that make sense?
No, it does, but the reason I say that is because my ears hear, and I listen. Huge concern, about the possibility of what could be. My short-term response, or knee-jerk response is, I don't think that if we look at long-term planning for the city, there's no arrangements with developers to develop the Delaware River area. We're not gonna put in a 50 split marina. If we look at all the components that draw people to want to stay in a town for vacation purposes, fortunately for the residents who have a lot of concern about that, we don't have that. We're not attractive to college kids to come and hang out. And I don't see that being an issue moving forward unless there's some plans in the city that we don't know about. So I get it and I feel it. I do live next to, my business is next to two Airbnbs. Thank God, all the people who come in and out of there are wonderful people. So I'm not gonna, belabor a conversation. I just wanted to share why I brought that up and was making mention of.
So two points. First, if you decide to make a motion to add that or to go that route, you'd have to specify what body would hear the appeal, because if we have the Alcohol Beverage Commission is already set up to hear those alcohol ones, and you would need to, so is that gonna be the council, the Board of Adjustment, Planning Commission, who hears that appeal? So then I'm gonna have to come up with standards to understand why.
Understood.
Which I could not do here today.
No, I fully understand.
Well, my question would be, what would the outcome of that be? Could people put together an opinion that says, no, you can't do it? I mean, is that how it works in the ABC thing? I don't know.
Is your mic on?
Oh, I don't know.
So
It
Commissioner.
says it is now, yeah, sorry.
I can answer that. So what would happen is, if, I think it's ABC, and it doesn't have to do that. I'm not trying to mimic ABC. I just understand how that process works. If you get letters from, let's say 10 people in the
It's
community.
10%, I think.
Right, and it can be one letter signed by X number of residents. Then, if they respond within that 30-day period, then you're required to have a hearing so that they can voice their concerns about why they are opposed to this particular property being used as an Airbnb. And again, it gives the opportunity for property owners and residents alike to have a solid word. They can share their opinion and be earnest about it. Not everyone who applies for a liquor license gets one. They have to follow all the rules, and here's the thing that is the jugular. I could lose my license very quickly if I didn't follow the rules, and I'll just leave it at that. So we already have rules in place, it looks like, for Airbnbs. That's my thought, just something to chew on. I'm from the South, we say things like that.
So if you decide to make a motion to amend for that, the one thing that you would need to do is, just like I've never gotten a liquor license, but my colleague gets them, there's criteria which you have to
Right.
satisfy. So then we would have to develop what those criteria would be for the granting of the permit. In other words, you can't just, it's not a popularity contest, you have to have
So
criteria.
before I would say that, before I would make a motion with that, I would fall upon the graces of people who have been doing this longer than I have. And is the process of adding another meeting worth the outcome? Is it worth making another amendment for Max to go back and redo it again? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, the concern I have is what is the standard? And if the standard is what's in the law, then we're already covered. If you have a higher standard, then what would that be?
It would be, so for example, one of the things that was brought up, if you want to have an Airbnb on 4th Street, you have to present occupancy, what your plan of occupancy is, days of operation, all of the things that would go with how are you going to operate. Basically, what are your days of operation? How do you plan to handle parking? Because we're going to say 4th Street doesn't have any additional parking. And I just use 4th Street because it's right up the street. And it could be said that if you cannot provide parking for your anticipated guests, then you don't meet the criteria.
But that's already in the law.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
already-
that's what, because I'm saying is the higher standard of disturbance or a party house here or what, you know, because we've set actually a lot of standards in here. That somebody has to meet. I think it's an interesting idea. I'm just wondering what other, and maybe our solicitor has some thoughts on that, but I think you'd have to get to a higher standard.
No,
to make that
I understand it. I just want the public to understand that we're thinking about that out loud.
So,
Okay, I'm gonna,
It's a good idea. I like it.
Commissioner, just to be fair, I would have to go back and research what those standards are, or additional standards would be. I try to look, as I told you, this is a sausage making process, right? So I did my best to look at a number of different B&B ordinances, for lack of a better term. And I put in things for discussion purposes. You know, there could be any number of requirements that you could add towards that. I think that I just don't have a good list for you sitting right here because those are the ones I thought were material. I tried to put in this ordinance, but doesn't mean that they don't exist. That just means I wasn't smart enough to think of them.
And let's just move forward.
Put it in the back of our mind.
Thank you.
Just kind of sort of following up on that thought. So somebody applies, you know, they have to present all that information, the proof of insurance, blah, blah, blah. Gets granted the license, but if the neighbors notice they're not in compliance, how do they then go about bringing it to the attention? I mean, is there a process or do they see if there's an issue? Because I would think if if you have a house that's consistently, you know, ends up with parties and whatnot, that license could be revoked, correct?
Yes, so on page 6, right? All the way at the bottom, subsection A, we talked about this the last time a little bit. Right, so there's a fine that's in, right, for the first violation. Because if there are 3 or more subsequent violations of the same offense, right? And, or if there's 6 or more violations of one type of event during that 2-year period, the city may immediately revoke the license. So, and there was some discussion about whether or not we want to shorten those up, but each day is a different violation. So each day it continues, it's a different violation. So that's a pretty short string on the licenses, and it gives the city the ability to revoke the license.
Sorry. This is a quick follow-up question that came to mind, make that statement. So how would residents know what our areas or homes are carved out for STRs? Where there be something on the website that, is there like a running list that will be posted, like these are the locations?
So because of there's a limitation in the number in the district, the city's gonna have to keep track of those, so let's just do a very simple example. Let's say a district has 100 potential units, right? That could be, right, and we allow 2%, so there's only 2 allowed in that district. The city's gotta keep a list of each one in each district. Whether or not that's gonna go on the website, there's no requirement in this ordinance to do that, but certainly that's available by the Freedom of Information Act.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure like residents are aware if this is properly being used for what it's purpose for or not. So that if they do have concerns like that, that it can be quickly addressed.
Yeah, let's follow up on that. I like that thought, because if you don't know and somebody's noisy, then just assume it's your neighbor. You know, so what if we said they have to be publicly listed and declared, whether they're bed and breakfast or short-term rental, that there needs to be a published list of the licenses on the website. I know Antonina wants to kill herself thinking about this.
I don't care, it doesn't matter, I agree with you, because
Yeah,
there should be a database that's searchable
visible, yes.
by,
visible to-
by
Yeah.
people in the community.
Would it be just as simple, right, by address, where a license has been
Yeah.
issued? That would be put on the city's website.
Yes,
Exactly.
I can make that change without.
Because then you would also know, if you see people just coming and going from a house, they're not being operated legally also.
Yeah.
And they could be also reported.
So you would need a motion for the website to addition.
Before we make a motion, I have a comment, regarding, along this topic. On page 4, section C, you talk about having an interior placard
Yes.
that lists, that's visible. Excuse me. I'm wondering if there's, a way to have some type of exterior placard, going back to.
I wanna stay away from exterior placards for sign code concerns.
Okay.
Trust me, I don't wanna touch that with a 10-foot pole. Sorry about that, I think it's not a bad idea, it creates all kinds of.
Something small, I mean, that need to be huge.
So the one indication of that folks need to look at, you guys added a requirement for a lockbox. So you would, I mean, that's sort of a telltale, it's not a sign, but it is at least an exterior.
A hint.
Yes, yes. So you would need a motion on, the posting.
Oh,
of-
yeah, Tamara, you wanna finish your motion?
Sure. Trying to figure out how to say it. I move that we approve an active public listing.
Add to the ordinance, an active public listing.
I would like to move that we approve, add to the ordinance a clause that indicates, an active public listing on the website of the addresses of all SDRs.
Yeah, of licensed properties.
Of the licensed property. Thank you.
close. We currently don't have a license requirement for Airbnbs, or for bed and breakfasts.
Well, that's correct, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah,
And I thought this was limited to,
No,
I thought her motion was limited to the
well,
short-term rental.
I think for bed and breakfasts, we also need that list. So,
Just so we're clear, when I did this, I did not go through the code to look at all the requirements for bed and breakfast. You may recall going backwards, talking about bed and breakfast. I wanted to define it, and there was an ambiguity in the code dealing with bed and breakfast, and we wanted to solve the ambiguity, but I did not do a comprehensive sort of code look for that. I'm fine if you wanna add in here, I just wanted to know there's a requirement, there could be requirements in the code for bed and breakfast that are not addresses. Does that make sense?
yeah, but I'm unaware of them and I read it really carefully.
Okay, I'm just saying, I don't wanna give you the false impression.
No, I get it, but, I mean, with hotel motel, I think we're in a different category, those will be obvious, but, throughout here, there are requirements for licensing of, a short-term rental. But there's no, this, ordinance is silent on, licensing or fire inspection or anything else required for a bed and breakfast. And it's certainly the sense of our, constituents, but also I think people here on the commission that they should also have a license.
Well, they have a business license.
And I have a rental license. Under the current code, business license and a rental license.
Okay, so they have two, what additional license are you suggesting? Cindy?
Well, it just doesn't say it here. So that's what my concern was. Bed and breakfast.
But as a business, they all have to have a business license.
Is it bed and breakfast a business?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we just add, licensed bed and breakfast as the title instead of just bed and breakfast? Or add,
I'm uncomfortable because if you would like a license requirement for the bed and breakfast, sort of thing and then have this, because it's probably a little bit different. I'd be happy to draft a separate ordinance for you to do that, and I think it muddies the water vis-a-vis this ordinance because it puts too much stuff in there. If that's something the commission wants, I'd be happy to draft it.
In my long business experience, chapter 2 never happens, so I think we need to get this into one document.
Okay, well, that would be a change, which would require me to go back a little bit more.
But if we can look in the code and see where bed and breakfasts are required to have a business license and a rental license, then I think our concern is satisfying, but I'm just
Well,
trying to look now.
Anybody that does business in the state of Delaware is required to have a business license.
So can we bifurcate the discussion? We have a motion on the table. Is
Yes,
there a second as to that motion?
This was the motion to do the database, correct?
Website.
the active listing, yes.
Kristen Zumar, second.
second that.
But that's to include both the bed and breakfast and the short term rental, right?
That wasn't part of my motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you want
Okay,
to.
That's
suggesting
fine,
that.
yeah, that's fine, so, yep, I can do that. So,
Cynthia, the state, when you apply for a license, you have to list what you're doing. We may be able to take what that code is. So if you're applying for a rental, there's a code that goes with the state license that you have, which identifies what type of business you are running. You know, I don't know the code, but I'm a restaurant, bar. If you are a laundromat, you get a code that,
Probably an SIC code.
yes, thank you. I don't know if that would satisfy that, where they have to show their SIC code to the city to identify what they've applied with the state for.
I just did a search on bed and breakfast and city code, and I don't see any requirements for a bed and breakfast to have a license. If you guys, I'm doing it on my phone, which is about to die, so.
Well, you're part of the tourist.
Well, in that case, all that language needs to be changed.
Well, that's what this word is.
That's what the quiz.
Then, and it won't change until so the city council approves this. So we're kind of in limbo about that. But they do have to, I mean, anybody that operates a business in the state of Delaware, and also I think in the city of Newcastle, you have to have a state of Delaware business license, you have to have a city of Newcastle business license.
That's correct.
So anyone who operates a bed and breakfast will have to have at least those two. And then there's an additional requirement of a rental license for a bed and breakfast?
Yes, 14037, we were just trying to look.
Okay.
Person rents property, yes.
So that means there's 3 licenses required for somebody operating a bed and breakfast in Newcastle.
2,
Well, plus the state, the
yes.
state plus the city business license and the city rental license. Is that cover you, Cynthia?
Does that help me? I know, I'm just, as is typical in these kinds of things, scattering it all through the code is undesirable. So if there was any way it could be in one place, I think it would be beneficial, but, as long as it's in there, I'm okay.
Okay, so we still have a motion on the table.
Kristen and Stephen both.
Yeah, second.
Correct. So we need a vote. So all in favor of the motion to have an active listing on the city website of all short-term rentals, is that correct?
And bed and breakfasts.
And bed and breakfast.
No, that was
Not my motion.
No, that was not Tamara's
I
motion.
thought you did that, but well, I move that we amend the motion to add bed and breakfasts.
For a second.
I second Kristen.
Okay, let's deal with. Yeah, let's deal with, thank you, deal with the amendment first. So I would have a vote on whether or not you wanted to amend the motion. This is on the motion, to amend the motion to include bed and breakfast.
So,
I think so do we vote on that?
well, wait a minute, I think we have to have some discussion.
Have discussion.
If I could comment, I mean, I understand the focus for this ordinance primarily was definitions of clarity. I mean, the bed and breakfast, I think in our case, it's just one Terry house. But I mean, it's pretty clear, and I think we're kind of getting into the weeds, going off on this tangent. I mean, I think there's value in listing, having a database, for the approved short-term rentals. But I think we're just kind of getting off into the weeds with regards to bed and breakfasts and hotels and motels and everything else.
I'm not sure under the new provisions if another bed and breakfast could even open in town.
You're thinking of the historic district, think of the whole city.
You still have to provide off-street parking.
Well, it's much more likely outside the historic district,
This is true.
which is why I had a lot of pushback from people outside the historic district, because they're not happy either. But I think we've created a good set of restrictions.
So, unless there's further discussion, so.
Does anybody else have any comments regarding adding bed and breakfast to the active listing of short-term rentals on the website?
I just wanna note that I kind of agree with Max that if we do wanna look at bed and breakfast separately, that we do that under a separate ordinance and we just move forward with the edits on this, as one stands. Because that's gonna be that's gonna drag this out even longer, and we wanna get a resolution for the residents and as well as the businesses that are involved. So I believe that we should work on making the edits to this document as it stands, and then we can do with the bed and breakfast separately as a separate ordinance and adjust that accordingly, including your comments as well as any additional changes that we'd like to have to make it consistent with the short-term rentals as well.
I appreciate your comments, but as somebody said who was listening, take it personally. We're talking about listing for people who might have one next door to them. That there's a bed and breakfast, which might have strangers coming in and out all the time, or a short-term rental next door to them. They might have children, they might have other considerations. Put yourself in the shoes.
I'm not saying I disregard that. What I'm saying is that we can do it as a separate ordinance and look at that separately so that we can still resolve it at a later date, but we should try to.
There's no later date. There's no later date. It doesn't happen that way. We have, right now, we have bed and breakfast and short-term rental together in this update ordinance. Let's deal with them now.
Well, the bed and breakfast was just a change the term to bed and breakfast and to define it. Other than that, there are no other edits to bed and breakfast in this particular ordinance. That's why I'm suggesting that we take it to a second.
It's an entirely new piece of language.
But it's just edits mostly the definition of it and the name of it, because it was previously listed as tourist home.
Well, we're not done fiddling with this ordinance yet. And
I know, but what I'm saying is, I think the ordinance should be, we should focus our edits on what's there currently.
I disagree with you fundamentally. Thank you.
You can solve them.
Okay, do we have any more discussion on whether we're adding bed and breakfast to the proposed amendment to the ordinance?
Regarding the web.
Regarding the website. Any more discussion? Okay,
So if you vote yes, then breakfast is included, and if you vote no, it's not.
okay, all in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? No?
It's very disappointing.
Okay,
Yes.
so we can address the bed and breakfast.
So we've just
And a
given ourselves a
subsequent-
new job, right? A second job right after this to do all the legal work around a bed and breakfast. Is that what I heard us take on for our next meeting?
I don't think it's merely just trying about an ordinance that you're at.
Oh, I think if you've got people coming in and out of a house next door to you, it's just as trying.
No, I don't
I
think that
do
way.
think that since we have focused primarily on short-term rentals, to go ahead and add bed and breakfast, which is a different category into this would be too much. I agree, we should get more definitive information regarding the current regulations around a bed and breakfast and handle that separately in a separate ordinance. But I do agree that we should handle this short-term rentals such as that are used by people like Airbnb, Vrbo, or what have you. And get this over to council as a recommendation or not recommendation, and then work on the other portion.
Okay.
I have a motion and second on the table for the original website.
Oh, okay.
Website vote.
Thanks. So now we need a vote on whether we want there to be a place on the city website listing short-term rentals. Is that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried. Okay. What else? What other questions do people have?
And there's a lot of conversation going on. Please stop your comments
Excuse me.
as the commission is in session. Thank you.
Oh,
I had a question with regards to page 2. I realized at the last planning commission meeting, April 28th, I was not present, I was under the weather. I think you all want me to share my germs, so I kind of stayed home.
we appreciate it.
But I noticed the topic of parking still seems to be a sticking point. And I understand that looking through the minutes that it was a consensus of the commission to go with the 1 parking space. So if my view is the minority, so be it. But I just have to kind of get it on the record because I wasn't able to do so last time. I think that the issue with the parking, on one hand, I understand the concern. I live in Newcastle as well. I live on the corner of 4th and Harmony. And I understand about parking, especially when we have events. And I also know that with the exception of very few homes on the Strand that have entrances on via 2nd Street, and maybe 1 or 2 of the homes on 4th Street in the historic district, off-street parking is next to nil. And as I mentioned before, it's because of the nature of the city. So I understand the concern to 1 degree, but I think that it's myopic. The parking requirement essentially is a veiled way of saying no short-term rentals, because no one has parking that they can provide specifically for their residents.
The one that started all
I'm
this.
talking, please.
Has-
I'm talking. There is parking available, however, as I mentioned before, within the city. The parking lot that's on 2nd Street near Bull Hill Park, the parking lot on 3rd Street, that's adjacent to, actually there's 2 on 3rd Street, adjacent to Battery Park. There's Delaware Street, and of course, there's at the end of 4th Street. I think just having the owner indicate where parking is available, I think that is probably a more equitable, solution. Requiring, for example, I think Terry House to have 1 parking space per guest. They can't do that.
They've exempted.
They'll be exempt, okay, great. But other than that, I understand, that we want to maintain the charm of Newcastle, Mayberry, but I think also we have to be a bit more open if we want to maintain this charm in terms of having tourism, which the city needs. If we, continue with this ordinance of no parking, required parking, basically you're saying there's not gonna be any short-term rentals. Ironically, the one on Packet Alley that's raising all this has the parking, so this, it's kind of ironic. But I just wanted to get that on the record, even though I know my opinion might not be in the majority.
Yes.
So at the last meeting, I had run some numbers and, in this packet, we had agreed at 2.5%.
Right.
Of units can be used for short-term rentals. I don't actually have the housing numbers. I have zoned parcels, was the information given to me by district. And there are 535 zoned parcels in the historic residential district. At 2.5%, that is 13 houses.
Right.
Based on that, 13 houses, I would agree with Stephen on removing that requirement. If we're only gonna allow 13 houses to be used for rentals, and you have short-term rentals, and you're gonna require each of them to have, I don't even know how many places have off-street parking. See, I know it's limited. But we are trying to keep the city as a close-knit community as it is, but allow some people to come in, not a whole gaggle of people, not hundreds of houses, especially in the historic district. Just to give you an idea, the historic commercial district technically wouldn't get any because there are only 31 zoned parcels. So at 2.5%, that's not even one rental. And I think that also needs to be addressed. Either we nullify the 2.5% on commercial, historic commercial. But the most would be R1 would get 20 based on their number of parcels. They would get 20 rental licenses. So we're not a total of 60, approximately 62 for the entire city. And that includes 0.45 for retail commercial, which I did just put everything in. So the maximum in the whole city, including Van Dyke Village, Buttonwood, Boothurst, Washington Park, everywhere, the total we're looking at is maybe 65 houses that could possibly be used. And at most, probably 13 in the historic area. So I would be good with this.
The way to do that is, if you wanted.
I did grow up in Newcastle, thank you very much. I have lived here my entire life and I was on 4th Street.
There will be no
I did live on 4th
participation
Street.
from the audience. Public hearing is over.
Thank you, Matt.
Now, if you wanted to make that motion to amend the parking requirement, that would be to strike on page 5, section D5. Because that would take out the parking requirement. If you wanted to raise 2.5%, if you wanted to raise that.
No, I don't want to raise that. That was my suggestion, was 2.5%.
Okay, so the way we do this as a group, if you'd like to eliminate the parking requirement, you make a motion under D5 to eliminate 5 from the list.
Well,
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
I think Cynthia wanted to make.
we're gonna have a
So
discussion.
you're gonna have a discussion. You have a motion, second.
Well, I have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Discussion.
So in our last meeting, we had a resident of East Third come before commission and talk about the issues that they were facing because there were 3 apartment buildings, houses divided into apartment buildings on East Third between Harmony and Chestnut Street, which had between 3 and 6 units in each one. Every one of those, because they didn't appear to be subject to the more recent parking requirements for apartment buildings, which are very strict, you may know. Because we looked at it, we now require apartment blocks to require 2 parking places, something I opposed, by the way. We now, our ordinance says 2 parking places for every rental unit in an apartment. Correct? Am I correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, I believe it's correct. So these units were made without any requirement for that, and anyone who's ever tried to drive down East Third knows that it's a huge problem. Anybody who lives there struggles to find a parking place every single day. And that stretch of street in our city is the worst one for damage to cars, wing mirrors knocked off, all that kind of stuff. If we don't do something to hold back the number of parkings that occur on the street, that problem will invade every street in the whole city. It's already bad enough. Try to drive down the Strand sometime. It's awful. And I really couldn't object to this more. And in fact, I have had conversations with others that depending, I know there are people in this room who want to have parking on site. That's been requested that we add that. That's not presently in the requirement. There are parking places all over the historic district that are off-street, which might be available to be rented for such situations. I know of one house on the Strand that has 5 parking spaces. So parking spaces are available for the intrepid business person who wants to go figure it out. Yes, it adds a cost, but go to any city and pay for parking. That's the way it works. I couldn't oppose this more. We live here, and by the way, get an event going, like the Pride thing on Sunday, forget about it. 150, 200 cars in town, and you're trying to park 2? Come on. I mean, I fundamentally disagree that we don't have tourism here. We got plenty of.
I didn't say that we don't have tourism, I said that the tourism that we have is basically event based for the most part, like 1 or 2 days at the most. It's not like we have week-long.
Nobody needs week-long tourism.
We don't have week-long events. We have day-long, maybe 2-day-long events.
So try to park for 2 days.
I understand.
Yeah.
I live here as well.
A couple people here who actually have to deal with this in the historic district. Trust me, it's no fun, and getting your car damaged is no fun. And these are people who are going to be making money in our residential area, and let them go figure it out. It's available if they want to do it. I would also, if I could, put in a restriction that they could not park in our municipal parking lots because they're used by residents. Go look at them. Residents who can't park on the street now. I strongly oppose this idea.
Do I have any other discussion?
The motion before you is to strike D5, which deals with the parking requirements for short-term rental. If you vote yes, then it will be stricken. If you vote no, then it stays just the way it is. Make sense? So yes is to strike, but no is to keep it the way it is.
All in favor of striking this motion, say yes.
Yes.
Free to strike.
All opposed, say no.
Or no.
Or
To the state.
other things you want to discuss on this document?
Barbara, the 2.5% in historic commercial district. We're not exempting, which is that just exempting the Terry House, then 2.5%, like I said, in historic.
But I
commercial
think that's the
district.
short-term rentals, the 2.5%,
That's what I'm asking.
as opposed to.
Their house is not intended, and I can.
This 2.5% does not apply to bed and breakfast, correct? So there can be no short-term rentals in historic commercial. Unless they're already there.
Pretty much.
I would argue that you could have one, that would take you no more than 2, maybe 1.
I have no idea.
It's about 3 or 4.
You have at least 2, you said.
There's 3 or 4, and some of them comply with the code as it exists today. And I do happen to know that a number of the people who have short-term rentals are converting them to long-term rentals because the churn is more than they want to deal with, so.
I can't imagine they're economically viable either.
I think that's part of the issue. They just want cash coming in, they don't want to deal with the human turnover.
Okay.
I went through this with a fine tooth comb, and there are many little things, some having to do with language and other things. I mean, do you want to zoom through them quick? Because I got a bunch of stuff on the first page and sure, we can go through, but I'm talking a lot, I don't want to stop.
Yeah,
The brilliant woman sitting next to me from talking too, so.
If we can go through those quickly, because it is after 8 o'clock at this point, and we have other business to do.
Okay. On the short-term rental definition,
Where are you?
I'm on page 2, section 2, short-term rental. Just from a cleanup perspective, on the second sentence, or parts thereof where a tourist or guest rents sleeping or living, I thought we were striking tourists completely out of this document. You don't need tourists there, I think it clouds it, just say a guest.
Whatever you guys want.
So that is my recommendation. Another topic that I think we need to consider is,
We have to.
We have to have a motion and vote.
Let's go, these are little fiddly things.
yeah,
Two or
let's
three of them at a
think
time.
about the, yeah.
Maybe we'll do it by page.
Okay. In the short-term rental definition, a house, duplex, apartment, condominium, or other residential dwelling unit or parts thereof, I recommend that we add the notion of no more than 4 bedrooms rented to a single party. I think one of the concerns that people had coming before us tonight is you could get a house. I mean, everyone's horror is 200 Delaware Street, or is it 400, the Bridgewater house being turned into a Airbnb.
Is that being turned into an Airbnb?
No, it's everyone's worst fear.
Oh, well, they have a lot of renovations.
Don't they just? But should that ever occur, you know,
We'll wanna find this.
They don't have any off-street parking.
oh, they have a gigantic backyard. They have a gigantic backyard, and they would be able to put a parking lot.
They would
But
have
there's
to-
no licenses available.
there would be no license available at this point.
Maybe.
Okay, so
So I just wanted to suggest that we consider adding 4 bedrooms.
is this the place to add that limitation, or is that somewhere else?
It's fine to add, yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's fine to add it, whatever you guys want to. You know, when you make wholesale changes, it becomes very difficult, like for me, like to see how it reads, because I try to read it over the whole.
I understand.
sentence, so it's hard.
But we wanna do it right.
I understand, yeah. So what was your addition, Commissioner?
So we wanna get rid of tourist, and you wanna limit it to 4 bedrooms, right?
Yeah.
Say your exact language, Commissioner.
So a house, duplex, apartment, or condominium, or other residential dwelling unit or part thereof, totaling no more than 4 bedrooms. Where a guest rents sleeping or living accommodation of less than 31 days. But this also seems to require that we clarify that it's to one renter. So it's not like the Terry House, which can rent up to 8 renters. So there's 8 or 7 or 8 rooms, pardon me. But for
I'm gonna-
houses that are.
I'm gonna make it friendly amendment.
Yeah,
That if you do that, don't do it in definition,
okay,
do it in.
somewhere else.
Well, I was gonna say, you could add section G on page 5, it says that, right after violation of penalties. You put it in the definition, then it makes it so that, if you put it in the definition, house that had 5 bedrooms would not then be subject to the licensing requirement.
All right,
Do it
fair
in the
enough.
definition. Right, so it'd be no short-term rental and contain more than 4 bedrooms. Yeah.
Our house has 7 bedrooms, so, I mean, I'm looking eagerly at this, right? All the money I'm gonna make with the short term.
I can add it to section 8, thank you, first. So,
Okay, if you all are okay with that,
Okay.
okay.
So that's 2 changes. Okay, what else?
The last thing in general, because the parcel count is not an actual count of residential dwelling units. And that means that we have an undercount technically of potential.
I said that, I said I only had access. to parcel.
I agree, and your contributions have been fantastic. The question though is residential dwelling unit defined somewhere else in the code? So we need a definition for residential dwelling unit. It's not here, it needs to be somewhere.
dwelling is a structure designed or used as a living quarters for one or more families, not to include hotel, motel, automobile court, rooming or boarding house, or tourist home.
So it's not any of those things. Yeah. So,
So we have a definition of a dwelling unit.
well, it says it's not a tourist house, so tourist house is gonna be blanketly changed to short-term rental. So it's actually, the definition says you can't do a short-term rental.
No, it just means it's not a dwelling.
It's not a residential dwelling.
Now I'm completely.
Didn't we go over this back in August? Somehow this rings a bell. We went through the same topic of, but defining resident.
Well, we were talking about,
Defining residential unit back in August, I think we talked about that auxiliary and.
yeah, the
a number of
auxiliary
things. So
dwelling
maybe-
unit.
We have a term here, residential dwelling unit, it's not dwelling unit per se. But the definition, that Chris just read is, if you just changed tourist home to short-term rental, it would exclude it. So that's what I'm trying to understand here. Because smarter people than us are gonna parse this.
I'm kind of lost on the concern.
Yeah, there's all kinds of dwellings that are defined, one family dwelling, attached dwelling, you got like 1,000 definitions of dwelling. Residential dwelling, just make sure it's for residents, right, that would be your standard construction. I'm having trouble figuring out what you.
Where's the definition of it?
You have a definition of dwelling, it has to be residential.
Is residential defined also?
Well, it's called the residential dwelling. There's all kinds of residential districts within the code, that's where people live.
Well, at the moment, we don't have a count of all those for some reason that we can count on. And, I just,
The parcel searches are close. Because unless you have two dwelling units on a parcel,
on East Third, you have 3 buildings that have between 3 and 6 dwelling units on a parcel. So, no, that doesn't work, I'm sorry. See what I'm saying?
yeah, but at this point, we're talking about somebody renting a whole house for a short-term rental. Not,
I don't think that's defined.
It's
You could
not
write your
defined.
apartment,
It's not defined that way, it's not defined.
it's not yet.
oh, okay.
You could rent one of those
So-
apartments on Third Street if they were allowing that. And they had a license, I see what it said these saying.
Well, maybe you put your thinking cap on. Mr. Solicitor, think about that, see if you think we need to add something there. We can move on. The bed and breakfast I was really concerned about, but I think, we've said it's owner occupied, which.
So I'm gonna make a suggestion.
No.
And it's not gonna be a popular suggestion, but I'm gonna make it anyway. So you've had an express term, of what I've had a number of additions, these are a number of changes which have been requested. And I am and remain uncomfortable, sort of going through this and this thing, trying to come up with a definition that you guys haven't seen. Trying to sort of pick through those. So what I'm gonna request is that we table voting on recommendation. Cindy, you can send me your changes or questions, and then we can add them into the next draft. I will annotate them and we'll put it on the website. I will also deal with your question of bed and breakfast. I can deal with that with a separate ordinance or what have you. And we can do this all at one time. But we've gotten to the point now where we're gonna be making so many small changes that it's not an accurate reflection of it. And again, not gonna be a popular suggestion, I need to have a relatively clean document for us to have approved.
So that means,
You can send them to me.
we'll stop now, everybody will write down what they want, send it to you, you'll make one document.
I'll make one document, so what I'll do is I'm gonna take things that you've already voted on and approved, I'm gonna put them in. So they'll be in there. And for all the, I wanna say, I don't mean to be disparaging, but the nits, right? The nits or changes.
You're a lawyer, you know how it is.
Right, I will annotate that and show where those changes are made, so accept all the red lines, it'll be in there. We'll vote on to next time, because I don't know that we're gonna be very.
But then these guys don't have any opportunity to discuss or,
Can you quickly run through the rest of yours?
I can try.
You would have the opportunities at the end of the next meeting, and then we'll have the ordinance in front of us, and you can discuss each one of the changes as they're red lined out.
As long as you put them in, I'll be a happy girl.
I'll put them in, and then we can discuss them, you can either say yes or no.
I doubt that.
Okay.
So we'll have two versions, is what you're saying? The version.
Just like this
approved red line and then the one with the
I'm gonna accept all the changes in there, every bit, right? I'm gonna add in those two, I'm gonna highlight. That's where the red line, so you can say it, and the red line.
There's one that I would like to discuss here, because I think it's important, and it's come up both from our commentators and also, I think it would be meritorious for us to consider it on page 4. Short-term rental license to the owner, section A, add in here that licenses are not transferable with the sale of a property. So you can't list a property as a short-term rental and sell it as a short-term. So if somebody buys a property and wants to redo it again, they have to go through the process.
If somebody sells a property that's currently a long-term rental, do they still have to, the new buyer has to still apply for the license? Okay.
And I would argue that the owner has to apply for the license anyway, the way it's set, so if you would make that clarification, that's fine.
Possibly not necessary, but fine.
Well, I think it's important because I've already heard of people selling apartment or selling homes right now, happening right now on East Third for the purpose of being short-term rentals.
But they still have to obtain our own license.
They still, yeah.
That's fine, but licenses shouldn't be transferable and.
Well, since they don't have them now, they can't transfer them.
That is true, but you can.
I'll add that. I think it said, I interpreted to do that, but was that clarifying language?
Okay, what else? Real quick.
I'm working on it, Mom, I'm working on it, hang on. Want to make sure, because I don't want to just have you guys find stuff in there. Oh yes, and this is important, operation violations include, there's a list. What's not included in here is the maintenance of the property according to the zoning requirements of the particular zone. You know, we live in the historic district where this has been the main question. Properties which are being used for this might not be maintained according to the requirements of the historic area. Somebody make a shortcut, put in a plastic window instead of a wood window, do other things of that nature.
That's addressed, in my view,
Yeah.
in page 5, violations and penalties. Any violation of chapter 230 or any other provisions of the city code may subject the violator to any remedy, legal or equitable available to the city.
What number are we looking at?
I'm on page 5, letter
Yeah.
F.
What number, I'm sorry.
At the bottom.
F, okay. Okay, I'm satisfied. I'll send you my other stuff, it's pretty small.
And then quickly, I'd like to get, I have like within the next couple of days, what I'd like to do, at least for the public, get it up on the website as quickly as I can, or in my schedule. If anybody else has any changes or any bits that you want me to consider or for discussion, you may send those to me, but let's get them to me this week. I gotta have time to get them in. I'm not very good at formatting things, so I need a little help from work with me. And I'm sorry not to allow it to go, but I just don't think it's practical.
No, I think it's good.
It's like editing a PowerPoint, it's a terrible experience, I get it. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
This is just a question, is there a noise ordinance in the city?
Yes.
Like
yes.
at 10 o'clock, so this does not need to be addressed, because somebody had mentioned a noise ordinance, and so that.
So, yeah, that section F was written or designed.
I just wanted
so
to
that
verify
they
we
could
didn't have to
subject-
add anything else in here.
Subjects with the fines and it was my catch-all, right? It's subject to the fine. But simply because you have that license doesn't mean you can violate any other provision of the code.
What is the noise? Is it 11 p.m.?
Do we need to officially kind of defer this, or can we just move on to the next agenda item?
No, you do not have to have another public hearing on two. You can just defer it to the next meeting, so a motion to defer it to the next meeting, consider the next draft.
So for your question, there are different provisions for different items, so radios, TVs, phonographs, and similar devices. It's the hours of 9 to 7 a.m. Yes, phonographs. Loading operations are prohibited between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Construction prohibited between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. And then different hours on the weekend. It's all in chapter 166.
So I'd like to make a motion to defer further discussion and vote on ordinance 555 to the July meeting. Can I have a second to that motion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Max. Okay, next on our agenda is we are required to provide a report to the state of Delaware annually, detailing how we are in compliance with our comprehensive plan. And that report is in your packet. You will notice the red is our answers. Does anybody have any questions or comments on any of those answers?
Madam Chair, just to clarify, the italics is our all of the italics is our answer.
Oh, all of the italics, okay. Oh, got it.
Black italics is the goal verbatim from the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Max.
And the
I
red,
can have permission to speak, Madam Chair, sorry.
Permission granted.
and the red is the status of that particular goal
Okay.
as stated in the comprehensive plan.
Got it. Comments, questions? Hearing none. Can I have a motion to approve this report? Stephen is making a motion that we approve this report. It will go on to the city council, but not until the July meeting. Do I have a second to that? Bree has seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, third item, what's next? Public comment. So if anybody has any public comments about anything other than ordinance 555,
It's an agenda item.
then fine.
Bill Gross, 1301 13th Street, that's gonna be short. Again, retroactive, you owe it to the city residents that anything you decide, whatever you decide, should be held accountable for the people that are already here, having a B&B, a weekend, a week, whatever. I think violations should be posted on the site as well. I think it's, again, vigilance. And to be brutally honest, and I've talked to at least 45 people, this town does not need more tourists. It does not. If we had more restaurants, if we had more stores, and I'll argue with you every day on this. It's not just 2 days a week or 2 days a month that these streets are jammed. If you had more restaurants, more stores, that would justify more work. Also, one last thing to say. If there was a tax, whether it's a wage tax, a income tax, where the city, the residents, the town, everybody would benefit from the increased tourism, I'd say hallelujah. Let's have busloads of people coming in. But at this point, you can run as many statistics as you want, but the restaurants, Tony, do you need more people coming in? You can barely handle what you have.
You know the answer to that, that's a rhetorical question, any restaurant wants more customers.
Can you handle more people?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I should be able to get a reservation any day of the week.
On Friday and Saturday, probably not,
Okay,
but the point of your question,
okay, again, having been a businessman and majoring in business and economics, I hear what you're saying. But if we were to expand the restaurants, expand the stores, retail, then I could say, bring it on. But you want to put a dog park outside the city, keep it in the city, and then you could justify saying, we need more tourists. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Okay, last item. Mike,
I said quickly, you'll be happy.
I did, I heard you.
We had 3 items come before PAC last time, replace boards on the front porch, 55 West Fifth Street. What happened is they started the work and then they realized that they didn't go through the Historic Area Commission. And so they stopped their work and they came and they did the right thing, which was good. This feeds into the last comment I'm gonna make. 46 East Third Street, some interesting updates to the house, those were approved. We did approve 55 West Fifth also. 411 Harmony was declined in its current form. They were given direction and told to come back and they could have a tier 1 approval, which means they don't have to wait a month to come through. But what I wanted to mention is that over the last year, I have personally written guidance based on what you asked me to do, Madam Chairman, for people in the historic district, homeowners, people renting properties, lawyers, real estate agents, developers, and I would add to that, I haven't written this yet, but I would add to it buildings which are listed in our listing, and it's not listed nationally, but in our register of important contributing buildings. Getting these through whatever the review process is, and I'm not putting anybody on a pin here, but it has been the slowest process I've ever experienced to get something. And we've done it.
And is that going through HAC? Because we haven't.
Going through HAC.
Okay, I was gonna say, because I haven't seen any of it yet.
No, I know.
Okay.
And I'm extremely disappointed that you haven't, because it's excellent work. But what that's led to is things like the Van Dyke Armory today replacing their window without going through HAC, and they should have done. And I'm gonna make an argument, they probably didn't know that they were a contributing building, they thought they were outside the historic district. But we've had many other instances of people coming before the Historic Area Commission, having found out after they bought their property that they were in the historic district and absolutely wrecking their plans as human beings.
No, I
We
mean, I
gotta
think what you wanna do is great, and as soon as you can get it to us,
I just
we'll
wanna make
look
a
at
point
it, but,
that
yeah.
we've been working on it, and for some reason it has taken an incredibly long time, and people continue to make mistakes for which we cannot hold them accountable as a consequence. And I think that's an important point that we need to think about. That will do it for me.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about that? Cynthia? If you buy a house with an HOA, you have to be legally told there's an HOA, you don't have to be legally told you have.
It's not spelled out nicely, I mean, maybe Antonina has a point of view on that.
Your declaration, when you purchase a house, the declaration.
Should be.
But they're wrong, real estate agents do them wrong, and I think it's because they don't know.
And that's for the resident, the homeowner, to take up with their settlement attorney then.
Yes, it's always
I agree,
registered
I agree.
to your title company and stuff like that. I mean, seriously, that's not a real solution.
But people also have to do their homework. No, they can move it to a historic area.
They were told they weren't in a historic area by their real estate agent. So they just wrote it
I'd
off.
be suing the real estate agent.
Well,
Right, they should come to the source, which is the city.
fine, but we need to provide communications for them. And to that end, I got recently turned on to the idea that there's a group called the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, because there's something for everybody. And one of the most important things they had on their website was a communications guide. How do you communicate this stuff to people who otherwise are not gonna tune in? And I've downloaded that, I'm gonna read it and see what we can learn from that and how we can improve our communications. Because I think it's on us. I don't think it's someone buying it at the very fringe of town and being told they weren't in the district and then suddenly finding out they're in after they bought it. You know, yes, they did sue people, but that's not what people do. You know, I know what lawsuits cost, it's a fortune.
Okay.
So anyway, more to come, but I wanna go on the record that we're trying.
Okay, great. It'd be great to have that. Okay, one last thing. We had sort of dropped our review of the comprehensive plan because of dealing with ordinance 555. We need to pick that back up. So, for July, we're gonna be looking at 3 more chapters, chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 6. So I will, yes, I will, can you have Lisa email that out?
Yeah, also, if you don't have a hard copy, I know, you're newer to the commission.
Yeah,
I can get you that, just, let me know if you don't have it or if yours is.
And Steve,
Just let me know.
oh, you have a hard copy?
Yeah.
So you need, okay. All right. Anything else that we need to discuss? Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Kristen, motions to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second, Cynthia.
All in favor, say aye.
Yay.
Opposed? Go.